Hello, welcome to Trump Watch, our special broadcast. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The countdown to April 2nd has begun and large economies are keeping a close watch. US President Donald Trump will unveil reciprocal tariffs in less than 48 hours. Speaking at the Oval Office, President Trump said that he has settled on country-based reciprocal tariffs. However, he stopped short of revealing the details. The US President was touting a flat 20% tariff on all imports into the US. But in the last few days, US trade officials have been signaling a tailored approach with different tariffs on different countries. The Trump administration has also released a list of foreign countries' regulations that it regards as trade barriers. The US Trade Representative's report continues to place India on a priority watch list, citing intellectual property concerns. It has also flagged concerns over India's internet shutdowns, data localization rules, among others. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that the United States government is considering to give India a temporary reprieve from the proposed reciprocal tariffs. However, this is contingent on approval from President Trump. The US leader has claimed that India will be dropping its tariffs substantially.
If you look at the European Union on cars, the European Union already dropped their tariff down to 2.5%. It was announced a couple of days ago, which is what which is a very small tariff. The United States charged very little. And I think I heard that India just a little while ago is going to be dropping its tariffs very substantially.
All right, Trump there saying at the White House that India will be dropping tariffs substantially. We're now joined by former Commerce Secretary Rajeev Kher. Mr. Kher, thank you very much for joining us. You've been a close observer of India-US trade negotiations over the years, and you may also be familiar with Brendan Lynch, who is a career diplomat, and he has been a trade negotiator for many years in the Obama administration, the Biden administration, and the Trump administrations as well. Do you get a sense that the negotiations last week have been positive, and even though the reciprocal tariffs will come into effect, India will get a reprieve?
Well, thank you, Parikshit, for having me over this program. Well, first of all, as far as the negotiations and the character and nature of those negotiations in the last 4 days, I think everything has been under a cloud. One doesn't really know what exactly has happened. But I can imagine that these negotiations have gone in the positive direction, because the statements that have come out clearly show that both countries are willing to enter into some sort of a understanding, and negotiations will be pursued in that direction. Now, as far as the whole issue of reciprocal tariff is concerned, I think there is a lot of haze around it. And as you said, very little has come to be known as to what exactly President Trump means by reciprocal tariff. It can mean many things to the audience. It could be purely a manner in which, a manner of speaking as to if you impose tariff on me, I'll impose tariff on you. And then it can increase in complexity from country to country, average tariffs being equaled. It could be product-based tariff being equaled. It could be tariff line-based tariff being equaled. So at the moment, it's very difficult to really say as to what exactly is meant by the reciprocal tariff, the phrase used very often.
Right. We'd also like to ask you, because earlier today there was a USTR trade estimate report which focused on the non-tariff barriers in India, from internet shutdowns. It spoke about regulations in the dairy sector which prohibit entry of foreign players. It spoke about data localization laws, India's digital commerce regulations as well. So, considering all of that, do you think US is putting a lot of pressure on India to reduce non-tariff barriers as part of the larger bilateral trade agreement as well?
As a matter of fact, Parikshit, the national trade estimates is a process which US comes out every year. And this essentially lists out the non-tariff barriers which different countries use against, in American perception, use against the American products. And it is for the first time that it is not as if these issues are not pursued by the successive US governments, but it is for the first time when these national trade estimates are being taken as a counterpoint for negotiations. And what one fears is that they can be tariffized. And therefore, when we interpret tariff, we can actually be talking about plain, simple tariffs, or we could even be talking about tariffs plus tariffized non-tariff barriers. So as I said earlier, we really don't know what exactly reciprocal tariff would include, whether they would be simple tariffs, import duties, or they would have many other manifestations of taxes and incentives and subsidies and non-tariff barriers and so on and so forth. So it's a very wide sort of a thing, but national trade estimates have been used by successive US governments to put pressure on us.
Okay. Sir, I'd also like to ask you whether US and this current administration under Donald Trump can be taken at face value. Now, they're a government which has decided to stop funding and financing of the WTO. They have pulled out of the Paris Agreement once again. They are going back on several international obligations wherever they feel it is in America's interest to do so. So do you feel that US has a larger game over here? It's not just about a bilateral trade deal or about India lowering tariffs. They want to become the largest energy supplier of India. Do you think there is a larger game to it and India should be measured with the kind of incentives it gives the US government?
Absolutely. See, we cannot, tariff is simply a weapon. Trade has been used very often by different governments in different countries as a weapon. But here now we see a very concerted, very well planned, very well thought out process in which trade is being used, and tariff particularly is being used as a weapon. And if you look at the history of the last 4 or 5 months, since President Trump began his campaign till yesterday, every point tariff has been used for settling all scores in 2 ways. One is use tariff as a tactic to bring the opponent to the negotiating table, and as we have seen, many opponents or many trade partners have, even without asking, have succumbed for very, very many reasons, and we can discuss that. The other is that you have open trade negotiations by challenging imposition of tariffs by President Trump, and that has brought the trade partner to the negotiating table. So tariffs are being used both as a weapon to get the partner come to the negotiating table, and they're also being used. There is a clear understanding that if required, tariffs will be imposed. The consequences of that imposition is something which has still not been explained. There are, of course, reports from economists of both sides where it has been differently interpreted as to tariffs will cause American economy to go into a negative spiral, inflation, and so on and so forth. And there are another set of economists who advise President Trump who have been saying that it will not be so. So you are right, there is a game plan, whether it's energy or whether it's any other product area where they are pursuing market access.
Right. Do you also feel, sir, that when it comes to these tariff negotiations, will these reciprocal tariffs, and no matter what the quantity may be or the percentage may be, will it really hurt Indian companies in the long run? Because, you know, as many global investors say, US has always gained from globalization, and now the US is looking strongly inwards. So even if those reciprocal tariffs are going to be on India, will India be very badly off in the next 8 months to 12 months or 2 years?
Well, Parikshit, 2 things. First of all, you know, this is part of a much larger game that US is playing. And tariffs is being used from the perspective that President Trump has been voicing, that it is being used to bring back manufacturing into the US, to reduce trade deficit, and so on. And so therefore, expecting that all of this would happen in a very short duration is absolutely unlikely, and it can be explained at length. I think from an Indian perspective, tariffs certainly in some product areas will cause a discomfort to India. If you take a short-term view, for example, automobiles, the other day automobiles were imposed 25% tariffs. Now, Indian exposure of automobiles export to US is very limited, and therefore, in the short run, it may not cause. But if India has ambitions of exporting automobiles to the US, then clearly over the long run, it will impact. So it all depends on what products. For example, look at the frozen shrimp. Now, if there is, for example, today India's largest export is frozen shrimp in the agriculture sector. Now, if there is an imposition of tariff, today it goes into the US at zero duty or between 0 to 5%. Now, if there is an imposition of tariff on shrimp, then clearly it will impact. And therefore, the industry will suffer because US is a large destination for India shrimp. So it depends. It will vary from product to product.
Right. My final question, sir, if very briefly, if you can explain to us that when it comes to the agriculture and dairy sector, in trade negotiations, these have been the red lines, especially when it comes to wheat, maize and dairy. Now, these trade negotiations are being watched by UK and EU also to see the kind of concessions are given. Will India be able to give up those red lines, allow access to US in areas such as agriculture and dairy products, or do you think that India will not cross that line and those sensitivities?
See, first of all, if you go by the rules of the game as they are contained in GATT, then there cannot be a specific tariff reduction for A country or B country alone. It will have to be an MFN process unless there is a free trade agreement which is negotiated. And as far as I understand, what is being talked about is a sectoral, multi-sectoral, bilateral trade agreement and not a free trade agreement. So obviously, the benefits which are given here would pass on to the other trade partners as well, unless it's a free trade agreement with the US. Now, so far as India's agricultural tariffs is concerned and the products of American interest are concerned, I think we need to take into account 2 points. One, there is a complementarity between the two sides in many product areas. For example, the US interest in almonds, in walnuts, in apples, in whiskeys is something where where India should have no opposition in a very significant manner. There are product areas where the US has interest and where India may have sensitivities, for example, wheat or dairy. Now, if you look at the Indian tariffs, I think they are on the higher side. In some product areas, they are significantly high. And I think there is a good case for India to review that, irrespective of the fact whether it's the US alone or it's EU. We need to look at tariffs from a very domestic perspective also, because we need to reform our agriculture sector. We need to make it more productive. And therefore, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to review our tariffs. Nobody is making a case that there should be a significant drop, or there should be drop at one go, or that there are no intermediate ways of doing so. For example, there are quotas which can be provided. But there is a case for us to look at these tariffs in a little more serious and a rigorous manner, and not just to rub them aside by saying that they are sensitive areas, sensitive products, and therefore we should not be dealing with them.
That's a very important point, sir. It's time to review the tariffs on agriculture and dairy. We cannot keep them aside as sensitive areas. It's time to review them properly all across the board. Thank you once again for being with us here on CNBC-TV18. We're now joined by Anurag Sehgal, Managing Director of Pricewaterhouse & Company, and Himanshu Tiwari, Partner, Trade and Customs at KPMG.